All right, we are back at it on the SuccessFlow podcast, and I couldn't be more excited for the guest that we have for you listeners today. Longtime friend, and we'll get into how long it's been, but actually met Leon about the same time as Steven, but we have gotten much closer over the last 4 or 5 years after rekindling since we met in university. I'm just so pumped to have you on, Leon. How's it going today?
That's great. Thanks, guys, for having me.
I'm pumped about this one, man. I think we met a couple years ago in Coronado, and we'll get into that story. But it's cool to have really cool and unique guests on. And from doing a little bit of the research that I did, getting to know you a little bit, I know you and Phil a little closer. I'm excited to kind of tap into that brain of yours, man. I know you got some good expertise in the field that you're in, and I think can help a lot of listeners in business and all sorts of stuff as well.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited to share what I've got and whatever wisdom, however little it is, right? Happy to share it.
So going back to how we first met, it kind of connects the dots here because I was in my second or third year of Master Tax and I had decided not to go to law school and was really eager on continuing education in some facet. And so I enrolled in the I think they called it the on-ground MBA program at University of Phoenix. And in that first class, you start to figure out very quickly after a few weeks who's actually doing the homework and who is not, and who's participating in class and coming with a perspective. And Leon was one of those guys that I identified right out the gate. He was one of the 20% doing 80% of the work. And he was always coming with a perspective across, bigger areas than just what was top of mind in that first class. I know that, you, myself, Fritz, we really had some good conversations in that class. And then we didn't talk for a number of years. You wound up switching roles and started getting into the startup scene quite heavily. And I was off and running with Master Tax with the then post-acquisition ADP. And it was actually a coach that I was working with, not Brian Bogert. I have you to thank for that, but it was a coach that was telling me, hey, who's in your periphery? Who are people that you haven't talked to in a long time that are doing cool stuff in the world? And shoot out, 5 texts a week. And you and I grabbed coffee and we just had a great conversation, catching up on what we were doing, and helped me get involved with Vincent de Paul, a number of things that we'll talk about. But it's just funny how far you look back and where we were when we started, in that long break in between, and what's happened since then. So super grateful for that. And as a starting point, why don't you take us back to what was going on into your life there? Talk us a little about what your personal life looked like then and where you were in the world, and we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I joined University of Phoenix when I was a full-time student at Arizona State. And so it just so happened that I get my degree, and they give you free tuition benefits there, right, if you're an employee. So I thought, well, might as well go and continue on and meet some good folks, and a lot of gratitude, right, that we met. And then, of course, that your coach challenged you to go out there and reconnect. And that was prior to me getting married. So I got married fairly young, mid-20s. We have 5 kids now, right? And so that's a big portion of my life. But, started that MBA program, didn't end up completing it, right? Thought I might go back, at some point. But my path has gone in a different direction. And we've had a lot of fun, mostly in the tech scene, which I'm sure we can jump into, right? And then more recently in this alternative investment space.
Nice. Well, I can relate to you there. I got married fairly young too. I was 24. My wife was 25. She's 3 months older than me, but we were married in 2 different years. So I tell everyone that she's gonna be 80 way before me. And we got a couple of kids. So I can relate to you being the dad and, getting that part of life going. But 5, man, I don't know. You guys don't have enough arms. You between you and your wife. I don't know how you did 5. I capped out at 2.
We went from 2 to 4 pretty quickly. We got a set of twins in there.
There you go.
Right? So it's certainly up the ante.
Yeah, absolutely. And then then you have the whole age-old question, like, what do you do on roller coasters? You always have the one odd one out, and usually that's dad. And the kids are having a blast with mom on those things. But Yep. Dude, thanks for again for jumping on. And I saw that Dad of 5. I also saw something that you were outside of the business stuff doing some youth basketball coaching.
That's right. Yeah. So I grew up playing a variety of different sports. I'm 6'3", so I tended to be like the guy who went and played the center power forward type position, right, growing up. And when I graduated from high school and went into university, right, was looking for ways to give back and got involved with some youth sports teams. And it's just been a lot of fun. And now my son, who's going in 6th grade, I got to coach their 5th grade basketball team this last year. So, it just keeps continuing.
Oh, that's cool. What part of town do you coach them? Is it a league that you just volunteered at, or what was the league called?
Yeah, it was. I went back to actually my grade school, so it was
cool.
a Mesa league, and then now for my son at his school, right, coaching the school team.
Nice.
The similarities are already coming out, and I think it's funny that you met in person 2 years ago while we were kind of walking and crossing paths at Coronado Island at Boondoggle, which the listeners are familiar with. But I can't believe it took that long, because I've told you both how much you remind me of each other. And I didn't even think about the basketball thing, but two dark-haired, handsome guys that started their career in sales and just have a positive impact on everybody they come across. They keep growing. So I guess, on that note, with the path of, sales, and I think of you as someone that has really built mastery around scaling teams, not just selling and the traditional kind of individual contributor to middle management. It's much more than that, but thinking about the organization as a whole and the entrepreneurial mindset you brought to the sales craft. Can you kind of help start us there when those transitions started happening, how your brain was working that's led you into more of the investment space and growing an entire enterprise, not just a specific sales team?
Sure. Yeah. So after I finished university, I moved into a couple of different industries, tried them out, found that they weren't the right fit for me, and ended up landing at the time was a small startup called Zenefits, and they had just come to town. They were opening a second office. It was the fastest growing SaaS company at the time, right? And we went and we did a pretty massive scaling operation, right? So we started with 20-ish people in a small office here in Scottsdale. And at the peak, I want to say it was right about 1,300 folks in a variety of different functions. And then there were a variety of different issues that came up. If you're in the Phoenix area, you probably have heard a few of those things, or if you're from SF, right, same thing. And then we had to start scaling down. And there were a lot of learnings there, right? What you do for onboarding for 4 people doesn't work when you have 40. When you start taking a look at all of the data points, when you go to scale, there are some things that work in small settings that again, you can lose track of as you're going through. And so it was an incredible experience. I met some really fantastic folks that have gone on to lead organizations all throughout Silicon Valley, right, and other parts of the country. But the network, the learning, everything else, I'll always be grateful for. And it was a great way for me to get a foundation that then I took and moved on, right, for a variety of other startups.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Zenefits story. Being in MasterTax, I think Zenefits actually they were trying to use MasterTax back in the day, and we started working with them a little bit to see if they would use the tax software on the back end. And then, yeah, there was definitely some disruption there in a good and bad way. And I think the guy that started it went off and started a new software called Rippling that does payroll and HRIS systems and all that kind of stuff, and is starting to make some waves. But I got to know, man, like if you were early on in Zenefits, what was that world like? Like, I feel like Wolf of Wall Street type of stuff going on internally sometimes. Like, is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it was wild for sure. And, I think one of the things that gave some insights to different folks, and we had folks from BuzzFeed and other types of publications that made their name in journalism because they went and they found leaked documents that the general manager sent out, right? And so if people want to read about that, for sure, it's all over the place. From everything from holiday parties to anything else, I mean, you get enough like folks who are straight out of university in a high pressure environment looking to, go and blow off some steam, right? You're going to find that those types of situations can be pretty crazy. Went to both President's Clubs, got to see up front and personal why Vegas may not be the best place for that, right? And then we did the same thing, but in Sonoma, right? And you would think that would be
go wine country, dial it down a little bit, and didn't happen.
No, I went golfing with a buddy the next day after the first day in Sonoma, and he looked at me and was like, my hands are shaking and I can't keep anything down, right? That was how wild it had gotten the night before.
Boondoggle light, we'll put it that way. Boondoggle light.
That's funny. Well, yeah, so I'm big, I don't know if you know, but I'm pretty big in the payroll and HR space. Was at Master Tax, obviously, when I met Phil, and then was with ADP until 2017, until I launched a payroll franchise out here in Phoenix. We've been working with payroll, doing small business and whatnot. And so that onboarding piece that you talk about, yeah, it's very different for small business versus mid market and up market and all that kind of stuff, and building out those solutions. But you left, and then did you get into? Do you still do stuff with VC funding, or are you full time at there's a new healthcare type organization that you're a part of called Cinnamon, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I do some fractional advising work, and Cinnamon is one of those companies. So, when I think about the SaaS startup space, if I were going to be thinking about an early stage startup that I'm going to join, it's funny you mentioned Parker at Rippling. One of the things that I'm seeing as a trend is that founders that go and solve the same problem a second time obviously have built-in advantages, right? They know what works within the technology that they built the first time, what doesn't work, how they would rebuild it. And Zenefits was a great example of an organization that grew so fast, so quickly. They were never able to get the technology to match the operational efficiencies that it needed. And so a lot of what ended up happening within that, it required hiring a human person to actually make the changes in the software and the back end. And so the front end wasn't actually doing anything, right? It would get sent to someone would make those changes in the back end and then go forward. And Parker took, the best engineers from Zenefits, went and spent 2 years and built something that's now worth, I think at last funding round, $13 billion. So, wow. To go and scale up a decacorn in that same space is pretty incredible. And, there are a variety of folks. Matt Plank is the CRO over there. Really good dude. But Cinnamon is a perfect example of that type of story. So the two founders, Eric and Brian, were at a company called Atlas for 5 years. And the focus of Atlas was to go out there and help health systems get connected to a variety of different programs that exist, both from the pharma industry and government, to pay for high cost medications. And when you're a health system and you're taking a look at this and you may not know what the opportunity set is, it's hard for you to go and invest in the headcount you would need in order to administer these programs, right? And so that was the initial thesis. Well, the problem was that Atlas was charging the health systems, and most of the competitors in this space do the same, 100,000 plus for a license to go ahead and utilize this. And then they transitioned to a BPO model where they wanted to have their own people doing all of this work and then charge the health system a percentage of the revenue that they recovered, which a lot of times ended up as free drug. Cinnamon took a different approach, and what we do is we give the platform away for free to health systems and then charge pharma. And we're, this entire industry, it's crazy how far behind it is, right? They're literally faxing in these documents into pharma, who then has to review and then go about making a decision on if they're going to approve the funds to pay for these things. And so we're able to build APIs and other things that are building the infrastructure that's going to drive this forward. And so it really benefits the three actors in the system: the patient, the health system, and pharma. And so I do that in a fractional capacity.
And you're the head of revenue. So are you primarily back office working internally, or is there any client facing stuff? Are you primarily CFO type of role?
It's an unfortunate title, right? You can think of me as like the chief revenue officer. So I I lead the go-to-market strategy, sales, customer success, those types of roles, and make sure that those things are running properly. And we're a two-sided marketplace.
Business development more so than the back end financials.
That's right.
Got it.
And so, on that note, right, because it's a two-sided marketplace, the revenue comes from pharma, right? But the actual demand comes from the health systems, and we're sitting at right about 12 million patients on platform today. And, we have a pretty unique path to get up to, 25, 50 million patients within the next year or so, which would be pretty incredible with some of the largest health systems in the United States. So it's huge. It's a fun project to be working on.
Absolutely. There's been very few organizations or companies in the tech space that I brought to Leon's attention that he didn't have a pulse on what was going on. I've always appreciated that about you, just given the nature of the companies that you've been with. But also one of those situations where everyone is most people are familiar with, the bots that are combing the internet for information, the ability to get that information and make things more efficient from collecting data, taking action toward it. But you were also ahead of the game on that, more as a hobby to start out with, I think, and then wound up, partnering and building something pretty cool there. Can you talk about kind of how that came about and what drove your interest there, besides just always having a pulse on what kind of the most up-to-date and cutting-edge business practices are?
Yeah, I think, so we mentioned Zenefits earlier, and that was an early experience for me. And going through the RIF or layoffs, right, that happened in 2016 was really a fundamental experience for me. So I always kept a pulse on what's going on in the marketplace, who can I stay in touch with, and what are the trends within technology. And in this particular instance that you're referring to, right, you mentioned Brian Bogert earlier, good friend of both of ours, right? And he came to me with an idea that he wanted to go out and, really scale up his coaching business. And we sat down, we looked at what was out there in the market, and we found a variety of different bots, right, that unfortunately now are being misused by a bunch of different folks, right, but that can really help scale outreach for folks that are starting up, especially a solo type practice. And we had a lot of learnings. We thought, our target market might be tech executives. That might be because that's what I was, right? And we found that business owners actually were a really good target. They were folks that wanted to invest in themselves, who had the capital to do so, right? And there wasn't a long and drawn out process for them to go and receive funds from the organization. And so we did that. But in addition to that, Brian's message really resonated with a wide variety of audiences. And so we did a blitz to get him on. I think it was something in the neighborhood of 100 podcasts in 6 months period of time. And he went on there and just crushed it and has built a really great business off of it.
Is that something that you do? Is that a self-employed role for you to help others scale and grow their businesses like that one off? Or is that just because Brian's a friend of yours?
Because he was a friend of mine, right? Yeah. If someone reaches out and they want to see, I can recommend some different tools and everything else. It's not as complicated or as hard as people make it out to be. No one wants to be sold, right? You need to deliver value. You got to figure out who it is that you have a problem that you're able to solve, right? And then it's just pretty easy from there. Come off as a pretty normal human being.
It's funny you say how that's pretty easy from there, because you're right. Most people cringe at the thought that they have to follow up with somebody to try and sell their services when they know they have a great product or a great service or great value, and they know that that person needs it or that customer needs it. But to have to send another email or another text, you just feel like most people are like, that's where they fall. It takes, what is it? We all know this from sales, 7 to 10 touches potentially to get someone on, to get you on their radar. So I'm sure that, having the AI and some bot mechanics there help with that a little bit to kind of get those cold outreaches going. But you still have to be the driver of following up. And it's really the mentality of, I have a great product that this customer needs. It's not me trying to sell them on purchasing my product. It's more about the value prop.
Right. There are a lot of scalable ways to go about personalizing. right? You can use a title tag, a location tag, all sorts of different things that are going to at least make this feel like the person is reaching out to you individually. And the point of this is not to trick anyone. It's to start a conversation. Once you start that conversation, if you don't have anything to offer that person, it becomes very clear very quickly that it's a waste of time for you and the person on the other line. But if you have something that is really going to solve an issue that they have and you've targeted well, then of course, right? Like let the robots do what they do well. And that's consistent follow-up. We as human beings are not good at that. We are probably good at coming up with the messaging or solving the problem or what have you, but going out there and like consistently doing the same task over and over, that's not what we're designed to do.
It's so true. I was just looking over my shoulder because I've got this follow up and close the sale, which is it sounds a little bit cheesy of a book, but I just kept it sitting on my desk early in my sales career, literally as a reminder, because of we're trying to improve the likelihood of good timing, because so many decisions are being made at what is top of mind at a specific window of time. And if you miss that, if you are not following up during that period, you've missed the boat. And it really is, even though timing's everything, that's not to attribute it to luck. It's to making sure that you've developed an authentic relationship and offering that's going to fit in that specific moment of time. So appreciate that. You brought it kind of full circle there back to when we met. You made the introduction to Brian Bogert, and your best friend, who's become close with all three of us, thanks to you, Ryan Corey, was another introduction you met, that you made during that kind of initial rekindling in coffee. And I would say there's no surprise after getting closer with you, getting to know Ryan better, that the way that we all know a lot of master networkers that are just connecting nonstop, and there's an art to it to where it can be it can be a turnoff the way some people do it. But you and Ryan both are always intentional about who you're connecting and the why, which makes it a totally different ball game. And I think that the more that we talk about service and truly trying to be of value to the people around us, you really embody that. And I have a feeling you're going to say it just kind of comes natural, but I was hoping you could expand. Ryan did a pretty good job, friend of the pod, on it, on why that comes so naturally to you and how you operate that way.
I think it flows through a genuine interest in the other person, right? This is really hard to fake. If you're going out there and your idea of networking is how many business cards can I give out and what's in it for me, it's not going to work out well for you. If you can start coming from a mindset of how can I help the other person get what they want, right? The law of reciprocity says, do for that person and they're going to feel like they need to give something back to you. And I found that always to be true, right? And whether it's a selfish or unselfish sort of thing, right? Anyone can decide for themselves. But I find that the interactions that I enjoy the most too are the ones where, again, I'm genuinely interested in what the other person has to say, and then figure out, can I help that person with an introduction or something similar?
And that is a bamboo banger. That's what we call our value drops that summarize some of the key points in an episode. And that was one if I've ever heard one. Would you agree, Steven?
Yeah, for sure. And you made a good point of saying that you try to be interested in the other person. And I can't remember where I heard it from, so I won't be able to credit. But be interested, not interesting, is something that I've been trying to live by, because if you're the most interesting person in the room, then you're in the wrong room, right? You want to be interested in what the other people are bringing and the value that they're bringing and how you can help them and be that resource. And I think, a lot of times people have burnout and they have things, because they're so focused on what they can get and the things that they're working on, and not so much what other people are focused on and how they can help. And if you spend the time, one of the things that I like to do is in the morning, spend all my time on myself in the quiet morning before my wife and kids get up. That way I can spend the rest of my day on everyone else, right? What can I be a resource for everyone else? So that helped me kind of get out of some ruts and some burnout and things that I was doing. And I'm not getting so much. Well, if I focus on being a better version of myself right now for this 1 hour, then the rest of the day I can focus on making other people better. And then everything you want back comes tenfold. And you're not even trying. You're just being authentic and empathetic and compassionate. And, from sales, marketing, as an entrepreneur, all of it is key to be interested, not interesting.
Yep, I think it's a great point. And I would love to be both. But for sure, interested comes more naturally to me. I think I was a pretty introverted person growing up, right? And so going into a sales-oriented role was certainly not something that I ever thought I would do, right? Thought I might go down the law path, like what you were talking about, or potentially go into medicine. But that wasn't the path that I walked down. And it created a set of challenges that I needed to rise up to and to really lean into. And as I've gone further along in my professional career, I've found that there are a variety of folks that can be really successful in sales, right? You have the very typical extroverted, gregarious, makes friends with everyone type of caricature, right, that we all see. And those people can be really successful, but so can the person who's really introverted and thoughtful and able to analyze things in a way that maybe the person who's relying on their extroverted nature may not be able to replicate.
I love that. And I always sing this from the mountaintops about sales, like as a craft focused salesperson, how many top performers, you being one of them, that I've met that are complete introverts, but they have the ability to take that ability of space and focus and intentionality and really authentically connect based on the problem at hand that you're trying to help someone solve. And the ability to do that, it takes a while to figure out the different personas in sales, but couldn't agree with that more. And as we're talking about the kind of connecting with people authentically and introversion and extroversion, this is a really nice way to transition. Steven was just sharing a story with his son before we jumped on the show about kind of interacting and solving a problem as a super dad moment that I love to hear, and wasn't a plan for this podcast, but I think it'll help us transition into a question I really want to ask you about. Father of 5, you have a great team game at home that helps with that, but I want you to expand on all the things that you've been working on with that father of 5. But first, Steven, I just love you to share what we were talking about beforehand on that kind of life lesson with Jack. Yeah,
well, we were talking about St. Vincent de Paul, and I had an interaction just 2 nights ago. My family and I were at Oregano's, and my kids started school yesterday. And my son's going into 6th grade as well. And it's his school, it's middle school, right? So it's a new transition. It's a lot of new kids and totally different environment than elementary. It's like you're like big boy stuff now. Like it's time, you're growing up a little bit. Anyway, he's naturally pretty quiet kid. Like he's not the first one to go up and say, "Hey, what's up, man?" Like, and, joshing around and starting the conversation. So he's been asked before, like, "Hey, Jack, why are you so quiet?" And he's like, "Dad, how do I respond to that? Like, I just don't have anything to say. Like, I don't want to look weird. I want to be like the cool kid, but I don't have like a lot to say. I'm always kind of in my thoughts or whatever." And I say, "Well, what do most adults say when, if you're quiet, it's usually because you're tired or you're just chilling or whatever." So it's like when someone asks you, "Hey, Jack, why are you so quiet?" Start with a response as simple as, "Oh, I'm just tired," or, "Oh, I'm just chilling," and then ask a question. So that way you get a follow-up question to be interested, right? And so we were having this talk. It's like, oh, when someone comes up to you, just say, "Oh, I'm just chilling. Can't believe we're back to school. How was your summer?" And then get them to talk about their summer. And then when they talk about it, come back with another question. So that way you can find something that you can relate with them on if it's a complete stranger, right? And it's like, as adults, we do this when we network and we're out there in sales and we're trying to find where we can find a commonality or something we can relate. And I told the story to Phil before you jumped on, and he was like, "Oh my God, it's the best dad story I've ever heard." And I was like, it's just natural though. Like, you just go ahead, Phil. I think it was a really cool moment.
My enthusiasm for little things like that is because not having kids myself, and when I see you all in action, I have a huge amount of respect on how you go about teaching your kids this way. And that takes me back to having this conversation with my friends, Steven, and most of my peers. the concept of time and what you were trying to achieve with work. And I get a lot of responses on what I attribute to Parkinson's law is time just shrinks or expands to what you have in front of you. And the prioritization changes and is natural and shifts. But that's a good answer, but I see it in action more and I get excited when I see examples like that. So Leon, for you with 5, what are some of the principles that you use to be able to achieve what you have professionally and are continuing to do, along with the extracurriculars that you enjoy as yourself? Like, how has that your parenting philosophy kind of grown and evolved over the years with the size of your family?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there are a variety of different things. I would say probably the number one thing that has evolved over time is time with all of them is time with none of them. And so, trying to spend as much time together is great, right? But finding moments where I can go and spend time with them each individually is really something that is what I'm trying to challenge for myself, right? And some of that, for this next year is what trips do they want to take individually? My second son is a huge Messi fan. He wants to go and see him play before he retires, right? Oh, cool. And so, hopefully we can make it down to Miami and go catch a game, right? Those types of things are pretty special and something that they're going to always remember. I think, going back to what Steven was just saying right now, I think that also on the question side is a really underutilized tactic, whether it's sales or interaction with different folks, is the number one mistake I see people say in their follow-up is let me know, right? If you can change that into a question, then it evokes a response, right? My favorite of those things is the pass along, right? Is there someone on your team who can take a look at this or evaluate or, whatever it might be? And then it will evoke a response. And that's how we're built as human beings. So I just wanted to make sure that I touched on that. But back to, the family, you're exactly right in that time. You think when you're a single person, right, that you don't have any time. And then, you get married and you think you have no time. And then you have kids and you realize that you had so much more time, right, in those first 2 phases of life, right? If that's, the path that you end up walking down. And so it's a matter of adjusting and prioritizing and going out there and trying to affect in the way that you want.
You nailed it with the one-on-one time. I don't, with my 2, we do not as often as I would like, but father-son hangout or daddy-daughter. Now, my daughter doesn't like daddy-daughter date because I'm not her boyfriend, so she wants daddy-daughter day. But she told me that when she was like 7. I was like, oh my gosh, she's a little boy crazy right now going into 4th grade. And I'm like, okay, this is getting a little weird. I'm not ready for that chapter of my life quite yet. But it is super impactful to have that even if it's just an afternoon, like, lunch and a movie or something on the weekend. Doesn't have to be extravagant, but that stuff goes such a long way with your kids. I loved how you said, if you're hanging out with all of them, you're hanging out with none of them. I haven't heard it put together that way. But I knew exactly what you meant because there's a chaos of the family. And usually it's, your attention span is going to be on one or the other unless you're doing a family board game or something. But you find that time when you can have one-on-one time. And Phil, we learned this from Gardner, who's a friend of the pod as well. We'll have to get you guys introduced. Leon, a guy named Matt Gardner, like the way he operates with his family, he schedules this stuff out, pre-planned yearly stuff. Like him and his wife sit down. He's like, okay, what do I got with our son? What do I got with our daughter? What do I got with you, my spouse? And then what are we doing together as a family? And then he plans all of his work outside and in and around that. Like the focus is family. And it's really cool to, seeing guys doing that because it goes a long way for sure.
That is really cool. And I love how intentional that is. That's what I'm striving to do. And sometimes we're doing it better than others. And of course, there's value in spending time as a family all together. But I'm glad that resonated with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to make sure that it makes sense if I didn't give a plug for St. Vincent de Paul. And we timed this not great because by the time this airs, I will have already hit up most of the listeners for this project. But Liam was critical in getting a specific portion of St. Vincent de Paul, both on the advisory board, and so grateful that you brought that to my attention. I didn't know enough about St. Vincent de Paul before you made that introduction. I knew of it, but it's been such a big part of my life since, and finding a way to focus and generate, generate time, attention, and treasure toward a need in our backyard. And so the listeners have gotten all that in the past, but specifically Angels on Call, Leon was critical on helping get a very specific use case for individuals that have a story, so we can talk about where the funds are actually flowing. When you go to donate, you don't want to just be adding money to a pool that you don't know, donation without representation. And so this is a specific area where we're both captaining different time periods of teams where we can raise money for specific individuals. But Leon was able to bring his tech savviness and expertise to mapping out how do we actually do this and get it from A to B. Can you just give us a little highlight on that for the listeners? Because it's something that Ryan, Steven, and I did not dive in too deep on that episode.
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. The idea here is how can you go and take someone who's in need today and get their story in front of folks that are willing to help them. And part of the issue that we run into as human beings is that when you have this really large problem to go and solve, and you put it in, there are however many millions of folks that are going hungry today, you're thinking about, well, I can't really impact that much. So you end up not doing anything at all, right? And if your heart moves you to go ahead and help with that problem, it's a lot easier to say, okay, Leon's family needs X number of dollars so that they're not out on the street tomorrow, right? Can you help with that? And that using technology in order to make that one-to-one interaction is great. And the folks that designed this, that built it, that brought the idea, I give them a lot of credit. And I hope that this is something that a lot of nonprofits end up adopting and using. And it goes back to, so there's a book that I read probably about 10 years ago called Power of Moments. And it goes into the science behind why this is true and what creates a powerful moment. It was written by a Stanford professor. And so I would challenge anyone who wants to really understand a bit more about like how you create impactful moments to folks to go out there and take a look at the research that they did.
I love that. We're all about creating opportunity on this podcast and creating pivotal moments for ourselves and creating pivotal moments for others. And it's definitely, I'm not on the board of St. Vincent de Paul, but I've been in and around Ryan Corey and the whole organization and done various events and different fundraising efforts with my own company. And it's an amazing organization. How long have you been a part of that? Are you on the board, Leon? How long have you been a part of the board? Okay. How long have you been a part of it now?
I think it's been 6 or 7 years now, right? Yeah. Phil mentioned Ryan's my best friend. And so I think that it's one of those things where for sure I was going to get involved in some way, but the quality of the organization is what keeps me there, right? And what we're able to go out there and accomplish. So yeah, man, it's something that, we get our family involved in this. And they make it really easy, right? If folks don't know about all of the different tax credits that are available here in Arizona, right? You can go out there and give and get a dollar for dollar state tax match, right? And so it makes it pretty easy for folks to go ahead and redirect those funds and to go and make an impact in the community. And we've been to the breakfast for a long time now, right? They throw a breakfast every November and talk about the stories of the folks that have been helped, and you just can't help but feel like your heart is full afterwards.
Well, and that's what's great about St. Vincent de Paul is even if you don't want to donate financially or you can't donate financially, they give you so many opportunities to volunteer. And you mentioned bringing the family out, and there's a lot of family event type stuff. The kids love this stuff. Like, I remember bringing my kids out to certain things and they're like, this was the best day ever. And they're out there giving back and, it puts smiles on their faces knowing that they're helping other kids that may not be as fortunate as they are. And, in that regard. And so it's a great teaching moment as parents. It's really fulfilling, like you said, to, in your heart to just give back. And if it's not monetarily, you have your time that you can give back through various events that they put on to help around the community.
Yep, you're spot on. I mean, you're out there. It also gives you a sense of gratitude for all of the, the great things that are going on in your own life.
Well, I think that brings us to the question that everyone gets on the SuccessFlow podcast, and really looking forward to hearing this. What is Leon Dame's definition of success?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take this in a couple of different parts, but to start off, I think that success, right, is achieving your purpose, and it's the trick is defining what that purpose is. And when I think about if I'm moving towards that or not, I think about it through the deathbed lens, right? So if I were looking for my deathbed, is this the thing that I would be proud to have accomplished? And there are a couple of songs too that come to mind when I think about this, right? You got The Nights by Avicii, 7 Years by Lucas Graham, and Live Like You Were Dying by Tim McGraw. And I think that there's wisdom in each of those three songs, right, that help to also just think through your own definition of success and how you're going to go about accomplishing it. So I hope that when I look back on my life, that I'm filled with gratitude and just pride, right, on the things that I accomplished.
Just gave me some afternoon jams for the playlist.
There you go.
I think that's the pod. Thanks so much for coming on, Leon. This was even more fun than I thought it was. We've been looking forward to this since we started talking about it. So thank you very much. And where can do you want us to post anything specific for the show notes where people can find you the best?
Yep, LinkedIn's probably the best way. Go ahead and connect with me there, and happy to start a conversation with folks.
Thanks, Leon. It was an awesome conversation. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thanks, fellas.
Back at you next week.